Real quick before I get into this review, I want you to know I'm not going to spoil story. You don't have to watch this and worry about the story being spoiled. Also, the footage you're watching, I recorded it specifically so they didn't spoil things for you. You might see like a weapon or two you haven't seen before, but you shouldn't get anything that is a spoiler. Even if it is spoiler, it's going to be like a level 1 out of 10 spoiler. I really want to keep spoilers out of my review, so I've done my best here. So you should, I would think most people by and large will be fine by watching the footage, but I promise you what I'm talking about will not spoil story in any way. I was not prepared for The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. I thought I was prepared, but I was incorrect. I mean, I run a Nintendo focused site. I've been talking about Breath of the Wild for a long time now. I've seen the interviews, I've seen the video features, I watched the gameplay, I knew the gameplay details. I've been following up on everything because I have to. So I knew going into this game that it was open world, that there was going to be lots to do, that you could, that it's going to break with a lot of Zelda traditions, stuff like that. But for as much as you know, all that fades away when you sit down with the game and actually play it. You get into it, and time and time and time again, you're just floored by how very different it is in so many ways. And that feeling has stuck with me and sticks with me to this moment. Like just last night, obviously I'm hours and hours and hours into the game. Things still happen that blow my mind. This is a new direction for The Legend of Zelda, and I can't stress that enough. So as you probably know, you start the game up, you get about 5 minutes of story, if that. Yeah, walk outside the Cave of Resurrection, and it's like, Legend of Zelda, okay, do what you want. And you can do what you want, pretty much. There's a couple little things right after that that nudge you to do something, and you should probably do it because it makes the game experience better for the item that you get and the exploration that it allows you. But for me, like, I started off and I was like, okay, I know it wants me to go talk to so-and-so. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go off on my own. And that's what I did. And no joke, that's what I did for hours and hours and hours. And I'm just talking about on the Great Plateau, the place where you start. Because it's humongous. It's mind-blowing. Just that space in and of itself is huge. And then, as I was out there chopping down trees and crossing canyons and finding weird food and all kinds of stuff, I was like, oh, wait, this is like the tutorial, basically the tutorial landmass of the game. So I went back and did the things that they were asking me to do, and it turned out to be a smart idea because, like I said, you get some things that definitely aid you in your quest and your exploration abilities. So I did that, and then the game opened up, and I'm like, okay, now I'm really going to explore. But I still spent so much time on the Great Plateau. I can't even tell you how long I spent there. I explored what I felt like was every nook and cranny, and then many hours later in the game, I realized there were complete portions that I missed. So I went, all the way down into the water. I went to the highest peaks of mountains, and I was everywhere in between. I went all over the place, and just that freedom, that element of exploration, was such a nice feeling to have because I can't even tell you the last time I felt that in a Zelda game. It's hard for me to look back on my time with Ocarina of Time because, rose-tinted glasses, that is an amazing game. Definitely a watershed moment in the franchise. But, you look back now and you're like, this was great, that was great, all that, blah, blah, blah. But, I don't feel like that sense of exploration in Ocarina of Time comes anywhere near what you get in Breath of the Wild. It certainly takes a note from that game because there was some exploration there when you run out in the Hyrule field, and it seemed big at the time, but this this game is so much bigger, and the ability to go wherever you want just keeps getting more mind-boggling as you explore. So what did I do? Let me tell you exactly what I did as far as how the game started off for me. This is not a joke. For the first roughly 20 hours of gameplay, I explored. That's all I did. I didn't do any story outside of what I already told you. I just went wherever the hell I wanted to go. I would look at something on a map and I go, oh, I want to go there. And then as I went in that direction, I would see something that along the way, and I'd change my plans and be like, oh, I want to go investigate that. You know, there's buildings, there's people, there's encampments, there's waterfalls, there's rock formations, there's valleys, there's mountains, there's treasure chests, there's towers to climb. It's so much. Thinking about it, it's insane. But yeah, for those roughly 20 hours, that's what I did. And I felt like I had gone everywhere. I was like, I've seen absolutely everything this game has to offer. And I was so wrong. What I saw wasn't even... this is a rough estimate, but what I saw, picturing the map in my head, wasn't even like a full 20% of what the game had. And that's just me looking at the map in my mind from overhead. I still didn't see everything in those areas. And I saw stuff I wasn't able to access as well. And I was like, man, and, you know, as I kept going and kept going, I was like, oh my god, this is really huge. Oh my god, this game is humongous. Oh my god, there's so much stuff to do. But that exploration was so much fun for me. Again, it's something I haven't felt in a Zelda game, and going out there and doing that was just so engaging. It felt like I was on a real adventure. I felt like I was just going out and doing whatever the hell I wanted, because that's what I was doing. And yes, I wandered into countless areas where I got myself killed right away. I'd see an enemy that'd take me out in one hit. Obviously, I only had like 3 hearts at the time, but still, one hit, they'd take me out. I'd see all kinds of stuff I wanted to do and couldn't, just because I had, you know, like crappy clothing on, and my best weapon was like a sledgehammer or something like that. So like I'd try and sneak by guys while they were sleeping, or I'd try to, pick them off one at a time by with some of the abilities that I had, and it would take a really long time, but I'd get one dead, and then I could slip past the others without them noticing. And make, looking back now, the terrible decision to continue on deeper into these areas where everything could kill me by basically touching me. But boy, was it fun. It's a ton of fun, and that feeling continues with you the entire game. And like I said, there's areas I haven't been in now, but it's that's fun. I want to go there. I want to get my ass handed to me. I want to know what's not around the next corner. I want to know what adventures I make. That's what this game is about. Yes, there's a story, and you get that, you get that note that you want from a Zelda game as far as story goes and your main motivation to go through. But you make the adventure, and I can't express how huge that is in this game. I know I play games weirdly when I talk to other people about, playing the same game, and we see how different our play styles are. And I can give you an example of that right here. So, I got a horse. I found a wild horse that I wanted to try and tame, and I did, and I took it to the stable, and I registered it, and I was like, this is great, got a horse. And there are certainly times where having the horse was a very good idea, because it got me out of very dangerous situations when I had no chance of getting away on foot. But the more I rode the horse, the more I was like, I don't want to ride the horse anymore. I want to go on foot. There's just something about walking around / running around on foot that led more into my desire to explore. Because, the horse can't exactly climb up a mountain, but Link can. And that climbing aspect is so crucial to this game, because the exploration would be wonderful in and of itself, but if you had the limitation of not being able to climb things, you'd have walls everywhere. You know how games have invisible walls, but in this instance we'd see the walls and would be able to explore. But because Link can climb, mountains don't even stand in your way. It's true, you increase your stamina by doing something, and there might be some mountains or walls that are tougher to climb without increasing your stamina, but that doesn't mean that there's not a way to get it done, and that's how I spent a good portion of my time. Anything that was in my way that I wanted to climb up and over to see what was beyond it, I was like, I'm not letting my stamina stop me here. I'm going to find my way to climb up. And I'd climb and fail, and I'd climb and fail, and then eventually I'd find a way where I could climb up a certain path and find a little lip of the mountain to stand on and regain my stamina and continue forwards. And that was so much fun for me. Again, I said in my impressions, that's like a puzzle in and of itself. I was exploring in a way that I hadn't done before, and I was using my mind to figure out the best path forward to accomplish what I wanted to, not what the game was telling me to do. So that climbing aspect completely changes the game. It's one of the biggest changes in the entire Zelda franchise because it aids you in going wherever you want. You really don't have any barriers that will stop you as long as you're willing to take the time to figure out how to tackle things in your path. Climbing, I never want another Zelda game without climbing. So climbing and exploration is a huge part of the fun for me in this game. But, you know, at a certain point I was like, oh, I should probably go see what the main story has to offer. It's funny how quickly I didn't care about the main story, which is, you know, what the focus of all Zelda games has been pretty much. But anyway, you have the ability to fast travel to some of the locations you've been to before, but I was like, I don't want to do that. I have no interest in doing that at all. I want to walk my way back or ride my horse back because, you know I went one way to get where I was going, but I know on the way back I'm not going to go the same way. There's so many different paths I can take. You can carve out your own path. So I wouldn't fast travel. I would walk or ride the horse, and I would never go back the way I came because there's all kinds of new stuff to see. And that led to more exploration because you see other things that you didn't see the first time. It's like a never-ending pattern of exploration, which is so gratifying. So gratifying. It's I'm smiling right now as I'm telling you about it because it's just so much fun. So anyway, I made a point to get back to focusing on the main mission, whatever you want to call that. And again, no spoilers, don't worry. So I went and did that, you know, met a colorful cast of characters along the way, and, you know, it took a little while to get used to voice acting, because you're not used to that in Zelda games, and while Link's not talking, you know, you hear voices of other main characters. And if you're wondering about how the voice acting is, I will tell you, I was very nervous going into it, because I envisioned a Metroid Other M situation, where I found the voice acting to be really bad, but I think in hand with that, the story in Metroid Other M didn't do the voice acting any favors. I don't have any of those issues here with Breath of the Wild. Some voice actors are certainly better than others. I really enjoy the characters, but some of the voice acting, you know, could be better, and some of it is totally fine, but nothing that ever took me out of the experience. The best way I can explain the voice acting is if you watch anime and you watch dubs. I would consider this a better dub. So we all know anime has some really horrendous dubs and some dubs that are more than serviceable. I would put Breath of the Wild in the more than serviceable category. But yeah, it's interesting to see a Zelda game with voice acting. I mean, I really enjoyed the story itself, and I really enjoyed how it was told, which I'll get into a little bit more in a second. But if the next game didn't have voice acting, I wouldn't be heartbroken. It'd be fine. I've played how many years of Zelda games without voice acting. I don't need it. What was here, I wasn't like, oh my god, this is amazing. I need voice acting in all the Zelda games now. But it was totally fine. I didn't have any issues with it. So if you're worried about it being really abysmal, I think you should be okay. If you'll remember, before the game came out, one of the developers kept saying, I have an interesting way to deliver story in this game, and it's a secret, and it's an idea I've been working on for 20 years, and blah, 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 blah. So now, obviously, I've experienced that. And, you know, it's pretty unique, to tell you the truth. I kind of side with them. It's not like it's a mechanic that I've never seen in any other medium before, but I was trying to think of games that I've played, and I can't really think of one that does what this does. And the way it ties the story together is really interesting, because, like I said, you can miss some of the story based on how this is set up. and it's up to you to search it out, let's say that. And what I saw were, when you get the story elements, it's little tidbits here and there, and each one I got was enough to motivate me to go find other ones, because I wanted to see what happened next, which I guess shows the sign of a good story. If, I watched one of these story parts and I was like, I don't give a crap, then it wouldn't matter because the story's bad. But yeah, I was compelled to hunt out the other ones, and not because of any completionist desires, but because I wanted to know what was going on. So I'm not going to spoil story, but that mechanic is certainly refreshing and engaging, and the story I was given, I feel the story is really compelling. If you've been following Go Nintendo, you know I'm a big fan of Skyward Sword, and I know that's not exactly a popular opinion, but man, did I love Skyward Sword, and one of the elements I thought was the best in that game was story, and I feel like Breath of the Wild has overtaken it, which is surprising, because I love Skyward Sword a lot. And I'm sure a lot of people just turn the review off because they're like, oh, I like Skyward Sword. Just being honest with you. But yeah, what I got here, really enjoyable, really woven together in an interesting way, and I really appreciated it. So here's where the open nature of Breath of the Wild really comes into play. So in other Zelda games, you would do the main story and there'd be some side quests, but like that's all you're really doing. Here, in Breath of the Wild, you play how you want to play. You could go through a few story beats and take on a few main missions, and you're like, I'm kind of tired of doing that. I want to do something different. So you can totally do that. You go out and explore, or you go out and take on side quests, or you go out and find shrines to tackle. It's the best feeling to know that when you're playing, and you are doing something and you're like, I need a little change of pace. You can do that in this game. The game allows you to go out and change the pace on your own. You make the adventure you want, which is something I've said before, but it's such a core part of this Zelda game. You will never get bored because you're the one dictating what you're doing. You don't have to follow the story all the way through. You don't have to get any story, or we'll say very minimal story. You can just go out and explore and have fun. I mean, I haven't even touched on the physics aspect of the game. The physics aspect married with the abilities that Link gets, and he gets those abilities right off the bat pretty much. They make this even more of a virtual playground. I'm sure some of you have seen people making makeshift like catapults to toss Link up into the air, and that's all based on the real physics in the game. It makes it, you could spend hours just doing stupid stuff like that. Again, I don't want to spoil things, but the real physics really add into that element. So if you need a little bit of goofy fun, you could spend plenty of hours doing that. If you only want story, then you go rush right at that stuff and take it on. If you just want to explore and take what comes at you as you're going, then you do that too. It's a Zelda game that comes at you in a million different ways, and you carve out what you want. Another element really worth talking about is how much the game feels alive, which I guess is very important when it's called Breath of the Wild, because there's so many different ways to interpret that, but, one of the ways is a living, breathing environment, and that really feels like that here. Not only just in the wildlife, because, there's deer running around all over the place, and foxes scurrying up mountains, and birds flying above, and lightning bugs at night, and all kinds of stuff like that. And it's fun to just see where they go and what they do, and obviously you can hunt them if you need to get health and cook meals, but it adds to the whole like living, breathing nature of the world. It's really interesting to see, and that also goes with the enemies as well, which you can see doing other things than patrolling. It seems like they have their own lives. So, enemies will certainly stand guard and watch for you, but some enemies will be sleeping, and some enemies will just be walking around, and sometimes enemies are chasing wild animals because they're looking for something to eat, and you'll come across enemies that are sitting in a circle where it looks like one of them's telling the other one's a story. You can come across enemies that are cooking food and dancing because they're excited about eating. There's all kinds of stuff like that. And it really makes the game world feel alive in a way that I haven't experienced in a Zelda game before. And it's interesting when you're talking about a game where you explore so much and you go out there and you see what the land has to offer. Those little pieces of the game really help to make the world feel that much more interesting and engaging. So it's really cool because you'll see a ton of stuff that you're not expecting to see and would never expect to see in a Zelda game. And when you do see it, it really makes the experience that much better. I briefly touched on hunting animals for health because you have to do that because there's no more heart pickups. You're not going to chop grass or break open pots and find hearts in there. And that's just one of the many, many ways that this game breaks from Zelda traditions. So obviously, not being able to find hearts randomly laying around is a huge change. Now you have to be self-reliant. You have to hunt animals, or you have to gather fruit and vegetables, or you have to cook things, and depending on what you mix together when you cook, you could end up with health boosts that give you added benefits, like letting you explore the cold, or letting you run around quicker, or making you stronger based on like elixirs and stuff like that. So there's a lot of really interesting ways that this game uses this new mechanic. And again, a lot of that is up to you. Don't be afraid to, cook whatever the hell you want. If you you find like peppers and choo-choo jelly, put them together and see what happens. It might end up being good, it might end up being bad, but you learn these things as you go, and you can also learn how to make them stronger or weaker or do what you want them to do, which is a lot of the fun. You'll definitely get some recipes along the way. People will tell you some things to make it easier, to give you some of the more basic stuff. But yeah, the fun is in just making stuff on your own and seeing what comes out of it. And I made some terrible meals, but they gave me health when I needed them. And then I made some other stuff that I really needed and really came in handy when I was trying to explore a certain part or trying to take on a certain enemy. So it's just another part of how like the overall puzzle idea has evolved in Zelda games. Then another big way the game changed things up is with weapons, because, you used to get a main sword, and then you'd go to dungeons, and you'd get items for the most part, or other weapons, and, you'd use those in those dungeons to beat the boss, or to, accomplish whatever goals needed to be done. That's not how this game works. You're constantly picking up new weapons, you're constantly finding new weapons, you're constantly taking weapons from enemies. And it's such a different feeling because, you might see an enemy that looks really intimidating, but you're like, ooh, he's got a really nice sword. Maybe if I could find a way to take him out, I'd be able to take that weapon for myself. So the churn for weapons is constantly happening. And, the further you get into the game, or depending on where you explore, you'll find weapons that do more damage and are more durable. So the weapon churnover eventually changes depending on where you go, but, if you wander into a place with crappy weapons and you don't have anything left, you might end up going back to crappy weapons for yourself again. But yeah, it keeps combat engaging, because one of the things I was really worried about was in Skyward Sword, again, I'm bringing Skyward Sword up, I loved the motion control fighting because it felt new and fresh to me, and I felt it worked really well. That's for another discussion on a completely different day. But when I was thinking about the next Zelda game, I was like, man, what if it doesn't use motion controls? That's going to be a big letdown for me because I had so much fun with that. Well, Breath of the Wild supplemented for me motion controls with the weapon changeover and the weapon durability and attack power and stuff like that, because it's always keeping things really engaging and fresh. So like, I'm a weird guy. When I play games, my friends will vouch for this. I'll find fantastic weapons, and I'm like, ooh, these are really awesome. And then I'll put them in my inventory, and I won't use them. I'll be like, I'm saving this for the end of the game, and then I get to the end of the game, and I never use them anyway. So I did kind of the same thing here with Breath of the Wild. I would use... I'd pick up great weapons, and I'd pick up, pretty much I'd consider anything I came across. I wouldn't necessarily pick it up, but I'd consider adding it to my inventory. And then whenever I came across enemies, I would use whatever the crappiest weapon I had was. And then I'd pick up their better weapon and keep it in my inventory and very rarely use it. But there are instances where I came up across some really tough enemies, and I'm sure you've seen some of the trailers show that there's like pretty much, we'll call them sub-bosses, sure, that wander around just the game itself. They're not in dungeons or anything like that. They're just out and about. They're usually very big, and they have their own name and their own health bar, and those will pop up, and you're like, okay, I know this guy's a little bit tougher than the rest of them out there. And, you know, I'd get into that and be like, I'll take them down with my tree branch and my broom, but that didn't happen. So I would take out, you know, one of my better weapons and at least hack them down to like half health and then whittle them down the rest of the way with my crappier stuff. So, you know, I found a good mix with that, but still, by and large, I held on to the better weapons and didn't end up using them. But it's still, I mean, that's me. That's the way I play. That's the way that I have fun. I like to challenge myself with using the crappiest weapons possible. But there's just so many weapons and so many to pick up, and they're all over the place. The only time where I felt like, oh crap, I'm out of a weapon, what am I going to do, is like in the very beginning when I had like 6 tree branches, but that quickly remedies itself. You know, you go from 6 tree branches to a rusty sword, and you're like, oh my god, this is a completely different ball game now. So it's all about keeping your eyes open and seeing what's out there. But just that part of finding weapons and the turnover, and even how you control the weapons, because you can charge up each weapon. I mean, hold the button down and charge it up. And they react differently. So obviously, if you have a giant axe, you can't have a shield because the axe is two-handed. But if you have a shorter sword, you can hold your shield out. Giant axes take way longer to swing, but do a lot more damage. And then, you know, little swords are quicker and don't do as much damage, but you can get in more successive hits. And then there's like swords. Well, I won't say, I don't want to spoil things like that. But there's all different kinds of things to take into account, especially when you're looking at the type of enemy you're fighting and what you're trying to do with them. So again, another way puzzles have been changed for the Zelda franchise here, and it's really fun. As you can probably guess, since you're dealing with a lot of weapons and you're dealing with a lot of food, you're going to spend a good amount of time dealing with inventory. And yes, you can upgrade your inventory slots so you can get more and hold more. But there's definitely an inventory game to play, and that should evolve as you go on in the game, because you'll get better at handling it, and there's quick menus and stuff like that. But depending on how you play, you might find yourself in inventory more often than not. And you know the way I play, because I just explained it to you. So I wouldn't really use the regular inventory menu unless I was like in dire need of something to eat. So then I would quick go into the inventory for food, find, you know, whatever I wanted to eat, and I do it's funny, I do it the same way. So I'd have like, you know, all these cooked meals and great stuff, and I'd be like, nah, I'll eat 8 apples and replenish my health. But anyway, that's when I would go into the main inventory thing, and then every once in a while later on I would go into inventory overall just to look over everything that I had and see what I wanted to do. But by and large, I'd use the quick inventory, which is, you know, holding down one of the buttons on the Joy-Cons, and then you just cycle through with the joystick. So I would literally, if something broke on me, I would hold the button, do one cycle over, because of the way I had the inventory laid out, and I'd grab the next weapon and just go. So I was popping in and out of the inventory quickly when I needed to. But you're certainly going to spend time with the inventory. That is something you're going to have to get used to. And I could see it annoying some people, because depending on how you manage what you have, especially when it comes to weapons, you might end up breaking the flow of what you're doing, and you could get yourself into some bad situations. You know, if you're not paying attention to the screen when it's saying your weapon's about to break, and then your weapon breaks, and you know, you're trying not to get hit, and you're running around, and you fumble with the controls, and you end up getting killed because you didn't do the right inventory button, or you didn't have time to go into the inventory and pick something you want. So inventory management is something absolutely crucial to this game. And for me, you know, you learn what buttons do what, and then you handle it. And I know it sounds weird to say, but I liked it. I liked the inventory management a lot. It made me feel like I had to be a lot more responsible for myself and a lot more smart with what I picked up and what I did. But I could see it being a gripe for some people. But I would imagine most could get used to it, and it's only going to be a minor gripe at that. And I want to point out, like, food. Like, you can have a ridiculous amount of food. You don't have to worry about having, like, oh, I have 6 apples and 2 steaks, and I can't carry anymore. Like, you can carry tons of food, so don't worry about that. The management and upgrading of inventory really focuses on your shields, your swords, and your bow and arrows. Another element I quickly mentioned earlier on was shrines, and I feel like I really have to talk about that because that's something new for Zelda games. So there are shrines all over the place. I won't get into how many there are, but you know, you can find treasure chests in them that have new items or weapons in them, sure. But you're also going to get something else from them that does something I would consider important. But you don't have to do it. It's not necessary to do it. So, hunting down shrines was one of my favorite parts of the experience because you know there's a ton of them, but it goes to show you how big the game world is because you're like, man, I've been walking forever and I haven't found any. But when you see like that little glint of like, they're all like little brown mountains with like orange on the top of them. And you see that, you know, way off in the distance, and you're like, oh, there's one. And I would, no matter what I was doing, I was like, well, that's where I'm going. If I could see it, I would go to it. It doesn't matter how long it took to get there. And shrines are little bite-sized Zelda dungeons, without a doubt. Some of them take 5 minutes, some of them take a lot longer than that. And it all depends on, you know, what's going on in them. So there's ones that are very heavily puzzle-focused. There's some that have a little combat and a little puzzle. There's some that use a lot of physics puzzles. There's some that use motion controls for puzzles. There's some that are kind of like a sport. I don't even want to ruin that. And then there's some that are completely combat focused. So there's all different types, and you don't know what one you're going into until you actually get into it. You know, you see the name of it, which is, they're all weird names, but then you go in and then you get a little, like, byline about, you know, like a few words that give you a hint as to what's going on. I think the ones that are fighting only are, like, they're called, like, a test of strength, and they tell you how tough they are. It's like, you know, a slight test of strength. Whatever I'm saying isn't right. It's something about a test of strength. But, you know, when you also, I don't consider this spoiler, you'll get something, you can get something, you should get something that helps you find these things easier. Because at first you're just literally wandering around and happening on them, but then you can get something that makes it easier to find them. And it's not like, the first thing you can get to make it easier to find is what I like, because it didn't like point them out exactly, and it wasn't like you could be 4 miles away from it and then it would let you find it. It was like a little nudge, which I liked, and it didn't tell you where exactly, you still had to find it. But yeah, these are great. Because you get to go in and do a little, like that aspect of it is very traditional Zelda, but it's bite-sized, which is really cool. So you could be out exploring and whatever, see one of those, hop in, and you get your little puzzle fix. And you're like, oh, you know, some of them are really, well, maybe I'm dumb. Some of them for me were really head-scratchers. I don't think I'm dumb when it comes to Zelda games, because I've been playing them for a long time, and I thought I knew how puzzles worked, but there were certainly some. I was like, oh, that was a really neat way to do that. But, yeah, those little shrines peppered all over the place help break up gameplay, because they're really hard to resist when you see them. You might mark them on a map and come back to them later, but yeah, they're just fun. And the only knock I can have against them is they all have, like, the same theme. You know, they're not laid out the same, that's not what I mean, but they all have the, like, stark gray / black stone, and like the blue and red like electric lines running through them. I don't know what else to say. So they all look that style, but they all have different set pieces, and they all have different elements to them, and different enemies and some. And so, you know, visually they all share a similar look because they're all shrines. I get that, but I'm saying I could see some people taking issue with them all having the same theme, when you consider, like, you know, previous Zelda games, the dungeons had completely different themes. But, you know, if you're following the main story, the shrines are supposed to be the little tidbits that you pick up along the way, and the main story will give you that thing that you're looking for from previous Zelda games. So, for me, shrines were a blast, and I still haven't found them all, and I love trying to hunt them down. And when you get tired of doing little shrines and puzzles, you can go out and get your ass handed to you by enemies. Like I've said in my impressions, enemies are so much more difficult in this game, and part of that is because, you know, they really hit hard in the beginning, and you'll get stuff to help you out. You know, you can get, it's no secret that you get different clothing and armor and stuff like that, and that will help you fend off some of the attacks, but enemies are still going to kick your ass, and they're not afraid to gang up on you. And again, that's really different for Zelda. Usually you have one that you fight and all the others circle around and wait your turn. And I feel like this time they were like, wait a minute, that's a terrible idea. We should all gang up at once. And it makes the game feel that much more threatening, which I like. It's fun. And, you know, you spend a lot of time with the game and you're like, all right, I know how these guys operate. I know how to work. And you get a little headstrong and you go into a battle. You're like, I can take these 4 guys out, no problem. I fight these guys all the time. And then you die and you're like, yeah, I shouldn't have done that. So you'll eventually get a handle on most of the enemies, but that doesn't mean their fights are going to be, you know, a piece of cake, because they're not. They could still swarm you, or they could still do any number of moves at any instant. That could take you, like, even when you have a decent amount of hearts, you could get hit like 2 or 3 hits in succession and you're screwed. So again, that's very different for the franchise, and I really like that, because I don't, especially in more recent Zelda games since Ocarina of Time, I feel like there really hasn't been a challenge so much in the enemies from Zelda games. I feel like they're just there in the way, and you know, you just push them out of the way pretty much. They don't put up much of a challenge. You know, bosses might have given you some trouble or some challenge there, but regular enemies never really were any threat. But now they're definitely a threat, and you have to take them seriously, which is a really cool feeling. I have to wrap things up. I could talk about this forever. I really could, and I tend to ramble on, but I hope I'm being informative, and I hope, first and foremost, when I give you my reviews or my impressions, I really hope my enthusiasm comes through, and I hope it comes through earnestly and honestly. I hope you know that what I'm telling you is 100% how I feel. I'm not putting on a show. I'm not trying to be like, well, I like all Nintendo games, so every Nintendo game is good. People that follow Go Nintendo know that's not the case, because I've certainly come down hard on some Nintendo games in the past, but this is not one of them. I can't say enough good things about this game. It's the next big evolution of Zelda games, without a doubt, hands down. This is the next step for Zelda, and it's not like there's so much to it. There's so much that's different, and I don't know how the developers managed to do it. First off, I don't know how they ever completed this game with the size of it. It blows my mind that happened, but somehow along the way, with all these changes, as radical as they are, they still manage to make the game feel like a Zelda game. And I've told you so many ways that it's different, but I don't know what it is. I can't tell you. I can't put my finger on it. I can't say this is the thing that they did that makes this still feel like a Zelda. I don't know what it is, but they did it. It 100% feels like a Zelda game. Yes, there are elements that are completely different, and you're going to be doing a whole bunch of things you've never done before in a Zelda game. But it still has that Zelda feeling, and that's not because, you know, Link is in it, or it looks like a Zelda game. There's just something about the feeling of it that is still quintessential Zelda. To think that Nintendo took Zelda and brought us A Link to the Past, which was the pinnacle, I think, of what the 2D Zelda games were, and then they evolved that into Ocarina of Time in a 3D world, and that, that's one of the most highly regarded and respected games of all time. So to think that we've come to this point again, where Nintendo has, as Miyamoto would say, upended the tea table during development and given us another Zelda game that turns the franchise on its head but still feels like Zelda, it's an amazing evolution. It's an amazing accomplishment. It's mind-blowing, it's awe-inspiring, it's engaging, it's one of the most fun experiences I've ever had in video games because of the freedom. You do what you want. And I can't stress that enough, and I know I've said that plenty of times, but it really is the Zelda game you want it to be. You want it to be puzzles and story? You do that. You want it to be exploration and you don't worry about any of that stuff? You do that. You do what you want to have fun. You make your fun, and there's plenty of fun to be had. This is I think one of the greatest achievements Nintendo's ever had as far as video games go, and me being a huge Nintendo fan, that's a lot for me to say, because I don't say that with every Zelda game or with every Nintendo game that comes out. This is, and I think most reviewers will agree. I could be surprised, but I think most reviewers will agree that this is the next evolution, the next step for the Zelda franchise. And to see this, and to see the level of craftsmanship that's gone into it, and the level of care and love, and I can't imagine where it would go from here. But that's something I say with Nintendo games often, and I'm always surprised. So I don't need to think about the next Zelda game. Usually I end a Zelda review by being sad and saying, well, I finished the new Zelda, now it's another 5-year wait until the next one comes out. That's not the case here, because I still have so much more to do, so much more to see, so much more to experience, and even if I see and do everything that the game has to offer, still just being in the world, especially with the physics-based stuff, is still a ton of fun. So I'm going to be stuck in The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, I imagine, for many months to come. And really, there's no better place to be stuck. Hey guys, RMC here from Go Nintendo. If you like what you saw in the video, why don't you give us a thumbs up and maybe even subscribe? We'd love to have you. If you want to see what else we're up to, you can check out GoNintendo.com for 24-hour Nintendo news. You can visit us on Facebook at Facebook.com/GoNintendo. You can check us out on Twitter at Twitter.com/GoNintendoTweet. And we're even over on Instagram at Instagram.com/GoNintendo. I put all the links in the description just to make it easier for you guys to follow. Thanks a lot.